holding you down, run into some trouble and see how many of your friends hold you down. Get into a bind where you need some money. I don't mean $5, $10. I mean $50 or $100, and see how many of your friends hold you down. Jonathan also said, David, if I die, I need you to hold my family down and look out for my family. And if you're walking around with all these people that you're calling your friend, you really need to ask yourself, can I trust them in my absence? When I'm not around, are they talking about me? When I'm not around, are they allowing people to talk about me? Because a real friend will knock somebody out on your behalf. A real friend will hold you down whether you are around them or away from them. And so as a result of their friendship, David, in honor of Jonathan, who is now dead, asks for somebody from Jonathan's family that he can be a blessing to. And so David calls one of his servants named Ziba, who tells him that Jonathan has a son who is crippled in both of his feet, and he lives down in a place called Lodebar. Can the church say Lodebar? And this young man was Jonathan's son. He was King Saul's grandson, which lets us know that although he was from a royal family, he didn't live in a royal palace. He didn't live in Short Pump, where he could go and have a nice meal at Cheesecake Factory. No, he lived a little further down the road where the streets turn into numbers. And he had to go get his food from Chicken Box. Y'all don't know nothing about that. He didn't live anywhere that had fancy houses and clean streets. He lived in Lodebar. But in spite of his place of residence, somebody thought enough of him to call his name before the king. Somebody thought enough of him to make an attempt to get him out of the hood of Lodebar and bring him to the royal court. And I want you to know this morning that part of the reason you and I are blessed right now is because somebody thought enough of you to call your name out to somebody who could be a blessing to you. A Ziba in your life thought enough of you to give your name to a manager that could hire you for a job. A Ziba in your life thought enough of you to recommend you to somebody who needed your gifts and your talents. And you ought to thank God for people in your life who put you in the presence of somebody who could bless you, who could be kind to you, who could do right by you when you were not expecting it, when you didn't know the person, and while you were living in a place that was not conducive for your success. That's why you ought to be grateful for good parents. You ought to be grateful for good grandparents and good aunts and good uncles and good teachers and good whoever else in your life that has taken the time to plant a seed in you and invest in you and do whatever they can to help you so that you don't have to die in Lodebar. But you can have your seat at the king's table. After learning that Jonathan had a son, David asked Ziba, well, where he at? That's not good English. The king of all of Israel, who could have blessed whoever he wanted to bless, who could have looked right at his own town and found somebody to bless, wanted to find this person whom he had not previously known or heard of and show kindness toward him. And I came to put you on alert this morning and tell you that there's somebody out there who God has sent who you do not know that is looking for you. God has somebody out there who has never heard your name, had never seen your face, never even had a conversation with you, but they're looking to be a blessing to you in ways that you cannot imagine. And this is why you have to do your best in whatever it is that you're doing, because somebody out there is looking for you. Get good grades. Listen, there are some classes that I would not have passed if I didn't get a C, but you stretch a little longer than that. Get you some good grade. Don't get a grade just to pass. Excel in your schooling. Your grades ought to be on point when you get a report card. Your parents ought to smile, not because you took that F and drew another line to try to make it an A, But your parents ought to smile. And it's not so you can brag on how smart you are, but because God has somebody out there looking for you. And your grades could be the vehicle that take you to the place God has for you. Every now and then, put down the PlayStation controller and put down the cell phone and go outside and find a ball to bounce and go ride a bike. And, if you don't know how to ride it, fall off of it a couple of times like all the rest of us did and figure it out. And go run down the block. Go to Planet Fitness like some of us grown folk need to do. Because if you take care of yourself, you take care of the soil that the seeds have been planted in, it will allow you the necessary growth to sustain your life so that when God decides to elevate you and uncover you and allow somebody to discover you, you'll be alive and well enough to receive the blessing that is to come. David sends for Jonathan's son, whose name is Mephibosheth. And when he shows up crippled and handicapped, he falls down on his face in front of the king. And the first thing I want you to know this morning is that when God gives you a seat at the king's table, you ought to remain humble. Somebody say humble. Ask your neighbor, are you humble? I want to suggest to you that Mephibosheth knew he had done nothing to even be considered for a blessing from the king. So when they brought him in, he bowed before the king to show respect and reverence for the one who had shown compassion toward him. It's interesting to me when we come in God's house and we sit and cross our legs like we owe God, like God owes us something. And we sit down on these padded pews and in this beautiful sanctuary and cross our arms, and somebody got to pump and prime you to say hallelujah. But you ought to realize that you didn't really deserve to be sitting in the seat you're sitting in, and that everything you have in your life you really didn't deserve to get. So you need to do like Mephibosheth did and bow before the king every now and then and let the Lord know I'm grateful for where you brought me. Okay, I'm sorry, that won't really in my notes. Let me get back to my notes. Remaining humble is easy when God still has you in Lodabar. Nobody really knows you. Nobody has called your name yet. But when God elevates you and people begin to recognize you and you start getting all these friend requests and followers on Facebook and Snapchat, staying humble might get a little difficult because if you're not careful, you'll do what my grandma says and start smelling yourself. Because you got swag now. You got bait now. You got a little car now. 4 or 5 pairs of J's and 2 or 3 people that hit like on your little ugly profile picture. But I came to tell you this morning that you need to follow Mephibosheth's example no matter how much swag you have, because remaining humble will help you to stay in the place God blesses you to be in and develop the character that you're going to need to stay there. And I wondered to myself why Mephibosheth chose to bow and take the humble road. And he may have thought that David wanted to kill him because of how his grandfather Saul mistreated David. And so he chose not to come in high and mighty, arrogant, and cocky, because when God raises you up, you have to remember who it was that raised you up. And if it wasn't for God this morning, some of us would still be stuck in Lodabar. If it wasn't for God this morning, some of us would still be struggling to make it out of some of the stuff we made it out of. Some of us would still be addicted to some of the things that we were addicted to. Look at y'all looking at me. And I know you in here this morning and you have on your nice clothes and you got it all together. But if we're honest this morning, some of us have on the right pair of shoes to cover up our crippled feet. There are some of us in here who have perfected covering up the things that we don't want anybody to know about. But isn't it amazing that although we are crippled, although we have issues, although we have some stuff in our past, God will still choose us to be blessed in spite of our crippled feet. So when God gives you a seat at the king's table, remember the words of the prophet Kendrick Lamar: sit down, be humble.